Welcome back to The Few Show, everybody. My name is Jim. I'm the co-founder of Xfusion.io and the co-host of The Few Show. I'm excited to be joined today by my guest, Ariel Camus. Ariel is the founder and CEO of Microverse. Previously, he was the co-founder and CEO of TouristEye, which was acquired by Lonely Planet in 2013. He has lived in Argentina, Spain, San Francisco, Boston, Vietnam, Indonesia, and El Salvador, and is currently based in Barcelona with his wife and chocolate lab, Luna. Thanks so much for joining us on the show, Ariel.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a mouthful, all the places that you've lived. I almost needed a breath in the middle of that, but that's an exciting journey for sure.
It is. I'm very, very grateful for that.
Let's jump right into this. So there's a quote that I read in the description of Microverse, which really caught my attention. It says, quote, "We believe the place where you're born shouldn't determine your opportunities in life." And I'm also very passionate about that, but I want to hear more. And of course, we're going to get into Microverse, but I want to hear more about that line and why that's so important to you.
Yeah, I think, it's what my life could have been, right? If I had stayed in the city where I was born in Mendoza, in Argentina. I love Mendoza, don't get me wrong, I love Argentina. But when my parents had to emigrate to Spain when I was 12, they made a huge sacrifice to, give me and my sister a lot of opportunities in life that we wouldn't have had if we had stayed in Mendoza. And I'll be forever grateful for that. But, they showed me that I had to they had to give up a lot to make that possible for me and my sister, right? We gave up all the family that we had in Argentina, which is not as easy as it is today to travel, to communicate. We had to put, behind us our community, our, culture, the little things that we liked about it, friends, and They had to move to Spain without a visa to work legally. So to me, the beautiful thing about the direction in which we are moving as humanity, as society, is that with remote work and globalization as a non-stoppable force, we're moving to a place where you should be able to access opportunities in life without having to sacrifice all the things that my parents had to sacrifice. And there was a trip I did after selling the previous company. I spent 1 month teaching in a University of Computer Science in Burundi in East Africa. That's kind of half entrepreneurial, half love story. I can tell you more about it if you want.
I'd love it, yeah.
I got to see an extreme version of what my life could have been. These people who are so passionate, so smart, who, so driven, but whose professional opportunities were kind of an extreme version of what my opportunities could have been if I had stayed in Mendoza, right? We were talking about their potential jobs and they were saying, well, there is this cyber cafe here in the town that I can manage. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's great. But I was living in San Francisco back then, seeing every company go nuts to find great talent. And there I was seeing all these people, whose talent were wasting. And then I started thinking it's not just they not having those opportunities, it's the companies not having the opportunity to work with them. Lonely Planet had spent millions of dollars buying my company just to hire a bunch of software engineers from my team. It just didn't make any sense. So it was kind of we have to do something about it.
Man, this is such an incredible time to be alive and to see right in front of our eyes this transition taking place. And I swear, this show is not a platform for me to talk about myself, but I can't help it in this situation because I'm so passionate about this topic. Our mission at our company is to create 10,000 high-paying, high-autonomous jobs in 10 years for people in developing countries. And right now, about 70% of our staff is in Nairobi, Kenya. And the level of talent and skill among our team in Kenya is absolutely unbelievable. And I know there's so many people there that just don't have the opportunities that a lot of people all over the world have. And I love what you all are doing at Microverse to sort of open that door and pave the path for people in developing countries to have those same opportunities. Let's use that as a segue to tell me more about Microverse, what it is that you all do and the audience that you serve.
Yeah, so it was right after that trip to Burundi that I came back to San Francisco with this obsession in my mind that, how do we solve this, right? And not just how do we solve this for the companies, for the individuals, how do we solve this for like humanity, for the planet, right? Like we have all these massive challenges ahead of us, curing COVID right now, and curing cancer, climate change, space exploration, where the more we evolve as species, the more complicated the challenges will become, right? And the more that global collaboration will become a necessity to solve those challenges. And I think, climate change and COVID are perfect examples of that. But I think COVID is also teaching us how bad we are at global collaboration, right? So I think that sooner or later, we will either have to fix this, problem of not being able to like really realize the full potential of every individual, or we'll pay the consequences of that. And so to me, I'm a rational optimist, and I just can't imagine a future where we keep wasting so much potential. But to me, that can take, 1,000 years. And I went back to San Francisco thinking, how do I make that happen in 10, in 100 years, not in 1,000, right? That might be too late for us. So I went back thinking about that, and I met the founder of Gitlab in San Francisco. I met Sid. This was like 5-6 years ago. They are 2,000 employees right now. They were like, 100, 150 back then. All of them, since day one, not because of the pandemic, this is since the day I met him, like all of them working remotely. And I was like mind blown by the kind of company, culture, business, product he was building with everybody working remotely, hiring in every country in the world, working across time zones, building, an amazing culture that was able to retain the talent, that didn't have to have the talent being poached by every competitor, being in the Bay Area. And I was like, this is it. Remote work, it seemed so inevitable that sooner or later was going to become a major force in this, ongoing process of globalization to be able to tackle these increasingly complex problems that we have as humanity, as society. And I started talking to him about this. He had a lot of really interesting ideas for the future of the world as well. And, he became a really important mentor in my life to talk very often. We were doing a really cool project in Zambia that, by the way, I would love to talk about to you about it. And he also showed me not just the potential of remote work, but also the challenges, right? And we started seeing that in order to join this global remote, future, it was not enough to be a great developer or a great, designer or marketer. You also have to be a great remote professional. And they were writing their amazing, team handbook that is publicly available, which is kind of my Bible right now and has been for the past few years.
What's that called, Ariel? I don't want to miss that.
Gitlab has a 10,000 pages long, publicly available team handbook.
Wow. So what would I search on Google to find that?
Gitlab Handbook.
Okay.
It's a Bible for anyone trying to build a remote organization.
Well, that's gold. I just found it. Holy cow. Wow. Okay, great.
It's amazing. Out of the 10,000 pages, probably 8,000 are very specific to GitLab and their teams, but the other 2,000 are pure gold. I think I've read them all 6 to 10 times already. We keep going back to borrow inspiration, to ask questions about that. And they're the first company not just to do it, but to do it at scale and to document it, right? And they're writing the playbook to show other companies how to do it. But part of the playbook, in fact, the most complicated part is not about building software, right? It's about how humans come together to collaborate across borders, across time zones, right? Through different cultures and backgrounds and religions. And there is this amazing book that I really recommend, by the way, called the Culture Map by Erin Meyer. She's the person that co-wrote the book with the founder of Netflix, documenting the culture of Netflix, by the way.
Right. Yep, that's right.
Great book as well. And she talks about 8 different dimensions of how people from different cultures fall in different sides of the spectrum in terms of how they make decisions, how they deal with hierarchy, how they deal with, high context space versus low context, how they deal with time flexibility, with giving negative feedback and praise and all these things. And, I think Gitlab does a really good job at taking all these challenges of multicultural cooperation into a set of like very clearly guidelines on how do you make that work for an organization. But the thing is that those are not obvious things to learn. So and it's definitely not something you can learn just from reading a book or reading their handbook, right? It's stuff that you learn by experiencing those things. And I think when I read the culture map, for example, I remember like reading the last page and saying, holy cow, I just got superpowers, but I don't know how to use them yet, right? I just know what they are, but it's going to take me a life to master them. So with Microverse, the idea was that, or like kind of the challenge behind Microverse was, how do we come up at the same time with the model that can teach the hard skills, the technical skills necessary for the future of the world in every corner in the world, that in a way that is accessible to everybody, financially and geographically, but at the same time in a way that can teach also the skills to become a global citizen and a global worker, which are very hard to master.
Yes. Man, now this is a stretch. This is an abstract stretch for my IQ, but I'm trying to imagine the future of work and thinking about how this plays out at scale. So at our business, we believe in treating people extremely well, providing high autonomous work environments, no screen recording software, like things like that. And we pay 2 to 3 times more than our competitor BPOs. And we see a level of attrition that's significantly lower and a level of joy at work that's significantly higher. And the remote function part, like the remote part of that is incredibly important because a lot of people in foreign countries have a 3 to 4 hour per day commute. And like, I think it's easy for us in America and probably a lot of other, a lot of other countries to think of a commute as like, oh, we are in a comfortable air-conditioned car listening to a podcast. But it's not like that in a lot of areas. It's a cramped bus and it's just a very different situation. So I'm curious how you see the world of work evolving in the future, call it 10, 20, 30, 40 years into the future in terms of our global economy.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of important challenges on top of besides, just education. And I think infrastructure is one that we at Microverse are seeing every single day. And of course, that is not the one we're choosing to solve, but there are a lot of amazing organizations. The Zambia project, by the way, it's about that. And for example, we see students in Nigeria. We have a lot of students there. The energy of Nigeria is amazing, by the way. And we have students that have to, commute for like 3-4 hours a day to go to a place where they can have access to a good internet connection. We have students that have to walk for 2 hours a day to go to a gas station, to bring gallons of gas, to keep their electricity generators running so that they can have their computers and internet connections working at home, right? Like when I face situations like that, I'm like, wow, like I'm so freaking privileged in every possible way and unaware of the reality of these people. So like, I think it's as important as it is to like invest in education. I think we cannot ignore that there are other barriers for this. And, for example, in Africa, the Achilles heels right now is access to infrastructure as a whole. Like Africa is like, it's a massive continent. There are like different degrees of this, but if I were to mention the biggest challenge is this one. Latin America, for example, has a lot of other, like on the other side, the advantages of Africa is English level. For example, Nigeria is terrific, Kenya as well. Latin America, for example, has much better infrastructure on average than Africa, but their English level is way worse than in Africa. That's their Achilles heel. And so the challenge in Latin America, I think the biggest one is not infrastructure, is English. And these are all elements that will be required to participate in the global economy. And I don't think it's going to be Chinese. I think it's going to be, English. And I think infrastructure will be key because at the end, we will be these roles that will first allow us everybody to participate in the global economy will most likely be kind of like, knowledge, like type of jobs and like in the digital world. So there will be require you to have access to an internet connection, to good infrastructure. They will require you to have a good English level to participate. They will be around very complex problems that will require collaboration. So for collaboration, you need the infrastructure. You need that shared language. So to me, I think it's undeniable that we're going to be moving to a world where like things become more and more and more global. So infrastructure and the problems we're solving and the tools that we are using. And, you know, we will need, maybe not everybody will have to have like a higher education, access to university to participate in this global economy, but everybody will be joining this global economy in one level or another, even if it's just because the infrastructure they're using to do their job or the technology they're using is provided by a global company. So at the end, I think the challenge is how do we protect the diversity of different cultures, but at the same time, finding this common language to work together as one. But I think it's undeniable that everybody will be joining this kind of jobs. But I think we have important challenges to solve for that to really happen. And I think we have some time to get ready for that, but not that much time. When you think about things like, you know, climate change, it's like, either we act together or, I don't know, I'm worried about that one.
Sure. Yeah. There's plenty for us to worry about in lots of these different topics and plenty of significant problems to solve. I want to stay here for just a second. And what I'm trying to think through and consider is the wage disparity between what you might earn. Now, these are extreme examples, but like in Silicon Valley, right, versus in Nigeria for a given position. You know, maybe it's a junior engineer, something along those lines. Do you see that gap decreasing over time to where eventually, I don't know what the time frame would be, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the gap between those wages is significantly reduced?
Absolutely. And part or a consequence of our mission is to accelerate that transition, right? So we can talk, by the way, about how we do compensation at Microverse, not just for students, but for our team members, which it's still adjusting based on cost of living. So there are still differences that come from the fact that living in Nigeria, it's still much cheaper than living in Silicon Valley.
Sure.
And if you pay the same, you won't be creating necessarily like equal opportunities. The world is very polarized about this, so happy to talk about it.
Sure.
But I am seeing two things. First is that the more senior the position, the more like the narrower the gap in salary becomes. So our graduates and friends that we have in developing countries who are now at senior positions, their salaries, they can afford, they don't have to apply to jobs. The jobs apply to them because there's a massive shortage of senior developers. So they are price setters, and if they want to make as much as someone in San Francisco, they really want to be doing that, they can, right? Now, if they can offer the same quality, right, the same professionalism, and if they can do it at slightly lower price, that allows them to be a no-brainer compared to a senior developer in San Francisco,
right,
while still making way more, when it comes to cost of living, they can be cheaper than someone in San Francisco and still have way more to save than for someone in San Francisco because of the cost of living. I think at the end, we are seeing already an equalizing force there, because what $100,000 a year gives you in San Francisco is surprisingly not that much. Whereas in Nigeria, $100,000 a year, like not only you can live like a king or a queen, you end up changing the life of your family, your brothers and sisters, your friends, your community, your inspiration. You start investing in other, people. So
that's right.
I do think that this is an equalizing force. Now, in more junior positions, the gap is way wider, but we are already seeing, the average salary for one of our graduates right now, it's close to $2,000 a month. But their average salary at before Microverse was between $200 and $500 a month, right? So we have
a huge gap.
20% of our graduates right now had a salary increase of a 10x, right? More than 60% have doubled their salary by going through Microverse. And sure, we're giving them some of these superpowers of being able to collaborate globally, and that's what differentiates them from other junior applicants. But it's not rocket science to do it, right? Like, I mean, it takes intentionality, but at the end, our goal is to be able to offer that kind of education to many more people, and companies are willing to pay for that way more than $200 to $500 a month, and there is a massive need for that talent. So I do think that narrow will close. Sure, it might take 10, 20, 30 years, but I think there are forces like Microverse like helping narrow that gap faster than that.
Yeah. Another thing that I've been deeply considering, and you hinted to this earlier, are all of the ingredients necessary to get someone skilled to the point that they are marketable in a technical career. So for example, in Nairobi, Kenya, there's one of the largest slums, I think, in the world called Kibera. And Kibera has massive infrastructure challenges that, from sanitation to, running water to electricity, et cetera, basic infrastructure. But not too far away in Nairobi, there's pretty darn good infrastructure. In fact, in a lot of cases, our team in Nairobi has higher quality internet than I have right here in Colorado. So it's crazy, but it's true. So, but then there's the foundational challenge of English competency. That's a big issue. And then learning how to work remotely as a skill set in terms of communication. I mean, like things like if you have the benefit of being in office, you can collaborate in person. You can see what work is being done. Like you almost have to over communicate in a remote environment to indicate what's even being done or the things that need to be communicated. So there's all these foundational skills, even like something as simple as typing speed. This is an interesting observation, I think. Like in Kenya, our staff there on average, they type 25 to 35 words per minute. And I honestly don't really know why. One of the hypotheses is that because they learn Swahili and maybe even the language of a native village, that English may be their third language, and they're literally translating in their head and thus type slower. But there's things like that, like you add all that up together, there's those foundational skills, and that's assuming infrastructure is already in place, right? That still they need to check those boxes, and then they can start learning development work. So I'm curious what you would say to that. And it sounds like the problem you're solving for is pretty specific. Have you considered getting into those like foundational skills, teaching English competency, things like that?
That's a really good question. And I think then we move the conversation from the vision and from, the more aspirational and human side of things to like the business side of things, right? And I think one of the biggest lessons that we had to learn over the last 2 years or so was that we can't help everybody, right? We use a lot this term of like idiot compassion, right? When you try to help everybody, you end up hurting yourself and others more than if you had been honest about it from the very beginning, right? So when we talk about this at Microverse, we always use the analogy of the onion, right? And peeling the onion one layer at a time. And so, for example, today at Microverse, that means that we can help people who have a good English level that allows them to, work comfortably in English. They have to have a stable internet connection. They need to have the financial support to be able to engage in the program full time for 10 months, more or less, which is the duration of the program. And those 3 or 4 things I just mentioned probably left out 99% of the people in any, developing country. And I think it's really hard to make peace with the idea that we are an incredibly mission-driven organization. I think, it's the number one core value we filter for in every single job interview. We never compromise. As a CEO, my last interview with a candidate, it's all about just getting a sense of like how much they care about our mission. Because if that's not there, we don't hire, right? But at the same time, that being our mission doesn't mean that we will get to that full realization, in just one step immediately, right? And
sure.
So what we're saying is today, those are the people we can help, because if we can help those people and we can build, a solid business model around that, then we can peel that layer and say, okay, with that validation, we can now attract capital. We can have confidence, we can have predictability in the model to start taking more risks and say, okay, what if now we launch a part-time program? Because we have an income share agreement, so people don't pay up front. So if you do a part-time program, it takes you twice as long to know if they're going to pay you, if they're going to get a job and pay you. So, doing a part-time program, And that's just one way why it has increased risks. So right now we're doing just full time, but maybe in a year we have the data, we can do part time. And then we peel another layer of the onion and we say now we can offer a 3-month long program before that where you just start doing everything in Spanish, for example, or Arabic, and then you switch to English because you were training in English while you were doing these initial months. And then, and we have experimented with all of this already, by the way, we can start offering living stipends where we pay you to join the school because we have so much confidence in our capacity to select, train, and place in jobs people that we know we can afford and we can attract the capital to pay you $300-400 a month so you can pay for electricity, housing, food. Your family won't be questioning what you are doing, won't be pressuring to go and help the family, help your mom cook and help your little brothers and sisters because you are bringing a salary home. Now you can stay focused on the program. And sure, then you will pay that back somehow and that can even be part of the business model. But, we will be peeling that onion. And I think access to infrastructure is one of those layers. And I think the project we're doing in Zambia is precisely to remind us as a team that while we can provide access to infrastructure to every student worldwide today, because doing that will shift our focus away from the one thing we need to get right at this stage in the company. Yeah. That is a hint of what the future could look like so that we never lose sight of where we are trying to go. But trying to do everything at the same time right now, I think will hurt everybody.
No, that's fair. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. Will you recap for me your mission, the mission of Microverse?
Yeah, the end is that the place where you're born doesn't determine your opportunities in life.
Well, I want to go even deeper here and consider, I've been formulating some thoughts around the creation of wealth. And I feel like that oftentimes, I'm sure there's probably exceptions, but I think it's as a result of adding value to the world and carrying responsibility. And I think of responsibility, I was driving home the other day and I thought, right now we have 42 full-time team members, and I feel the weight of responsibility to create and maintain good quality careers for people. And I know that's not all on me, but I do feel that weight of responsibility, which is heavy. And I've had multiple businesses and I've had multiple jobs. And by far, this is the most challenging and also the most rewarding. And I feel like that the benefit of wealth building comes from adding value to the world and carrying responsibility. That's my hypothesis. But I think also that when you have a mission that's outside of just revenue, right? Like your mission, the mission that I described about adding, 10,000 high-paying, highly autonomous careers in developing countries, that's something that people can get passionate behind. I think of an extreme example like Elon Musk, right? It's like he's either the richest or the top 3 richest, people in the world, depending on the time period. And honestly, I don't think the guy's obsessed with money. I think it's a consequence of what he's doing. He made electric cars cool. He's wanting to send people to Mars for sustainability. He's passionate about major problems and he adds value to the world. And as a consequence of that, he builds wealth, right? So I know that's a lot in abstract, but what would you say to that idea?
I think for most people who have been privileged to, start a career in tech or any high-paying job, you quickly realize that there is a point that is not too high where more money doesn't make much more of a difference in your life. I make a regular tech salary, and I don't need more money in my life to do much more. So very quickly, and for sure there are some values and some exceptions to it, but for most people, I think that very quickly you realize that there is so much more to money, and that if it's just money what you're chasing, you are chasing something that won't satisfy you. So in that sense, I think that we are all, as soon as we can join this economy and the privilege of being there, you soon start chasing things much bigger than that. And I don't know, I've been thinking about this. I always, when you mention Elon Musk, I often think that the value you create you can't just value it by the revenue generation, the value creates immediately in a tangible, way measured by dollars. It's also measured by how hard it was to make that possible. So here's the example that I think when I think about Microverse. How hard it is to teach a person to become a new software engineer in the US. How hard that is way less harder than accomplishing the same thing for someone in Nigeria or someone in Kenya because of all the other difficulties. So while the value they add to the global economy in a case might be measured by how many lines of code they can produce that will have a positive impact in the top line of the company.
Yeah.
I think that the actual value is more based on, but how there's a multiplier of that value by how hard it was to create that outcome, right? Because if we start looking at the world, we realize, we need more people joining the global economy to solve this problem, then we need to accept that we will need to be able to bring these people to join the global economy. And at some point, we were going to run out of people, in the developed world to solve this problem. So the companies that will create the most value are the ones that can solve that problem to create way more abundance in the world. And, create much more abundance if you're tackling this at a global level than if you're just doing this in the US. So I still don't have a good framework to quantify this, but I think that this multiplier based on the difficulty to produce the outcome is as important as the direct revenue number that you're producing. So in the case of Elon Musk, bringing humanity to Mars, I mean, you can try to quantify the economic impact of that in humanity, which, by the way, is probably a very hard exercise to do in a meaningful way. But when you think about how hard it is to be able to accomplish that, I think that that's what gives it a multiplier or a different kind of dimension other than, it's like, if we can make that happen, we will be able to solve whatever massive challenge we have in front of us, because in order to make that happen, it requires a different way of approaching things, a different way of collaborating, and that is a very useful skill to have as a species.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to highlight that you touched on earlier, and I've been thinking about it since you mentioned it, is you're not just benefiting if a junior engineer in Nigeria goes from making $500 a month to making $2,000. He or she is not only going to support themselves, but very likely their entire extended family. And I know you touched on that, but it's like, that's personally relevant for me. And I've heard of our staff that are doing exactly that they're now making 2 to 3 times as much. And we have 3 or 4 cases where we've hired the spouse of our team member as well. I'm like, that's fun and very cool. But the point is and then I hear so-and-so I'm able to pay for their apartment now. I'm able to pay for their food. I'm able to provide a car for them. I'm like, that is so incredibly rewarding. And when you think about impact on a larger scale, you keep that up, and over time, the entire community is benefited in a significantly positive way.
There are, using, I think, the words of, there was one article in the Andreessen Horowitz blog, I think maybe 2 years ago, that talked about hidden network effects. And I think there are so many hidden networks effects here. Mm-hmm. And of course, it takes a while to see them because they're hidden, right? But one example that blew my mind recently was a student from Nigeria who told me, Ariel, I just graduated. I got this amazing job working for a company in the Americas, and I am starting to create a group to select Nigerian people applying to join Microverse, so that with my salary, I'm going to be paying them a living stipend for them to join Microverse. I was like,
that's crazy. How is that not even just emotional for you? And that is there's no better feedback than that. That's incredible.
When you mentioned something, there that really is important to me. When someone was recently asking, when we do onboardings of new team members, we do a meet and greet where the new person joins in a Zoom call with whoever wants to join in the team. And every person in the team asks a question to the new person, but they answer the question themselves first and then the new person. Then you jump to the next person and we keep going around. And this time, the new team member at the end asked one question that everyone had to answer. So we flipped a little bit. And her question was, what do you love about working on Microverse, right? And I think for half the people was, the team, the culture of the company, the team, the people here. And the other half was the mission, right? And my answer at the end was a very nerdy one. I'm an engineer by background, so I can't escape that. It's like, well, if we were to draw a graph with, 2 axes and 4 quadrants, right? And in one axis we have long-term and short-term, and in the other one we have the brain, and in the one we have the heart, right? Microverse checks every single quadrant, right? I find tons of stimulation, intellectual stimulation, brain stimulation when I think about how the heck are we going to scale this to get to 1 million people in the next 10 years, right? That keeps me, my head is spinning in a really cool way every single day. But then when I think about, well, how is it going to feel personally as a team, as species, to really be able to create a world where more people have access to opportunity, where 1 million more people and all the cascading effects of that with their families, communities will have access to better opportunity. Wow, that's going to be amazing. That's such a much better world than what it is today. But then I remember one of our first students from Kenya, Kevin, got a job at Microsoft. And the day he got the job offer at Microsoft, he called me and he said, Ariel, my mom wants to talk to you. And I was like, I'm in. That's what I'm here for. Let's do it.
Okay.
And I jump in a Zoom call with his mom. She has this massive smile. And she tells me, Ariel, I am so proud of my son. But I'm also so grateful to you on the Microverse team. And those days, I don't care if you get to 1 million, 100,000, 100, or just kidding. It puts a smile in my face. It warms my heart, and it's so fulfilling, even if it's just one person at a time. But then every day there's so many intellectual challenges as well to figure this out, and it's just stimulation in every possible way. And that's the biggest lesson from selling the previous company, is that when you start a company, even if things go really bad, it's going to take 4 or 5 years of your life, even in the worst case scenario, right? And if you're going to be spending that time, that precious time of your life on doing something where you put so much energy, you better be doing something that you really care about, right? So for me, Micro's checking all these boxes is something very unique and something that I'm really grateful for.
Wow. We've interviewed over 130 founders on the Few Show, and that's one of the most profound things I've heard. So thank you. I hadn't considered the idea of engaging the mind and the heart in a way that is symbiotic and makes sense. And that makes it just so meaningful on both levels. I don't know. I want to dwell so much longer on that. That's so good. I know we're... Oh, please go ahead.
You just reminded me of someone. I don't remember who told me this, but someone told me, I'm going to give you a piece of advice when you're raising capital from VCs. With a VC, you can either turn on their hearts or their mind. They can either turn a side of the brain that wants to make an impact or the side of the brain that wants to make money, but not both at the same time. And I was so discouraged and mad at that idea. I'm still rejecting that. That is the world in which I want to participate, right? And of course, there is part of this that is true, and I keep that in mind in every conversation. But at the same time, if what it takes to build this is to just be doing things for the sake of making money to someone, I don't really want to work. I don't want to be working with them, right? So for me, raising money, it often feels like they have all, the power, they have the money, but I keep reminding myself that, they can't create value without us, right? They can't create revenue, they can't create a return for the investors as much as we can do it often, I don't know, without their capital. But it's a symbiotic, relationship.
Yeah.
And we need to start standing our ground when we say, hey, the impact is as important as the revenue, because otherwise, I'm sorry, I don't want to work with you. And it's freaking hard to say that when you need the capital, but if we don't start doing that, we'll never change things.
Yeah, well, and it brings respect by anybody that would eventually invest with you and your team, and that's the most important. That's an example of playing the long game versus looking for a short win. Yeah. I'm so far from being done. We could talk for multiple more hours. This is so much fun. Let's end with this though, because I know you've got to run. I'm curious, what advice would you give to your younger self? And you can pick the time period, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever. What advice would you give to yourself based on what you know now and the experiences that you've had?
I think it's a piece of advice that so many people gave me when I was, 16, 17, 18 years old. And I kind of I never listened to that, which is to not rush things, and very connected to thinking long term, right? But it's like, oh, I need to finish college really quickly so I can, start a company. It's give yourself an opportunity to take a break, to, the best way to think long term is to optimize your energy and your joy for the long term, which is all about enjoying things today, right? And living in the present moment. So as much as we have been talking about the future, the vision of that, at the end, I might be hit by a bus tomorrow or later today, and all I have is the conversation we're having right here. So it's, it's putting 99% of the focus, the energy, and the, finding joy in whatever I'm doing today.
That's brilliant. I love that. That's a great place to end. Well, thank you so much. You've been so gracious with your time and have a remarkable amount of wisdom and passion to share. So thank you for taking the time to share that with us. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jim, for inviting me to participate today.
Absolutely. So the website for Microverse is microverse.org, and we'll link to your LinkedIn as well. What's the best way for people to reach out, prospective students or anybody that's interested in learning more?
For students or partners, definitely our website. If you want to hire people from all around the world, you can go to the hire button at the top. If you want to apply as a student, just go there, apply, and there's tons of information. Our FAQ, the admissions team is there to answer any question. For me, I think Twitter is the easiest one. So it's twitter.com/Ariel Camus. And I love Twitter. I'm hanging around there and, engaging with people.
Totally. Great. Well, thanks again for your time. Hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, Jim. You too.
Cheers.